Hi, everybody, and welcome to Sleepy Science, the place where curiosity gets cozy and science tucks you in. Tonight, we're heading underground, deep underground, into a world where light is a long-forgotten myth and silence is pierced only by the soft scratch of something with too many legs moving just out of sight. You're in a narrow passage now, the air damp and cool against your skin. A drop of water falls from the ceiling and lands squarely on your forehead. Classic. Your flashlight flickers once, then again, and then it dies. You're alone, in the dark, with something chirping nearby that definitely wasn't there a minute ago. Welcome to the secret lives of cave crickets and their fellow darkness dwellers. Just a heads up, you probably won't survive this if you're a small insect without armor, a sense of smell, or a solid fear of fungus. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? I love seeing who's drifting off in what corner of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle forward, ducking beneath a rocky overhang. The air smells old, earthy, slightly sour, like someone left a wet towel on a pile of pennies. It's not gross exactly, but it definitely makes you think about microbial life. The cave pulses with a barely there rhythm, each drop of water marking time like a patient metronome. This is a place few creatures dare to live. And yet, right now, dozens of eyes or eyeless sensory pits, if we're being biologically accurate, are locked onto you. You've just walked into someone else's living room. Or more accurately, a neighborhood. One that's been developing for millions of years under the feet of clueless hikers. The first thing you notice is the quiet, but it's not the peaceful kind. It's the thick, muffled silence of deep earth, where sound travels differently. You hear your own breath, a distant shuffle, and was that a skitter? Probably nothing. Or possibly the local welcome committee. Let's get this straight. Caves are not dead spaces. They're thriving microcosms filled with creatures that have made wild evolutionary trade-offs. Trade-offs like, I don't need eyes if I can smell your footprints. Or, why bother with pigment if no one's judging my pallor? Historians still argue whether ancient humans viewed caves as sacred places of rebirth or just convenient holes to hide in when saber-toothed tigers got pushy. But whatever the case, humans have always known caves were special. They painted their fears and dreams on the walls. They buried their dead in cool crevices. They even occasionally got lost and became part of the ecosystem. Whoops. But let's bring it back to you. You're crouched now, inching deeper. The walls are moist and pockmarked with strange mineral veins that glow faintly if you squint. Some of those colors, they're alive. Bioluminescent bacteria feeding on the trace minerals in the rock. It's the kind of glow that would be romantic if you weren't also sharing the tunnel with a blind centipede roughly the length of your forearm. Cave biologists, yes, that's a job called creatures like these troglobites, animals that spend their entire lives underground. They've evolved to thrive here, shedding traits like eyesight and pigmentation in favor of longer legs, enhanced touch, and for reasons that make sense only in the dark, really complicated mating rituals. More on that later, and yes, it involves antennae foreplay. The most unsettling thing? Some of these species are found nowhere else on Earth. You could be 10 feet from an undiscovered insect right now, and you wouldn't know unless it crawled directly into your snack bag. Which, to be fair, it just might. A quirky tidbit. In Slovenia, there's a cave-dwelling amphibian called the oelm, sometimes nicknamed the human fish because its pale skin looks eerily human-like. It can live for over a century and survive without food for up to a decade. A decade. Think about that next time your stomach growls 2 hours after lunch. You slide past a curtain of stalactites, the mineral drips forming shapes that vaguely resemble melted chandeliers. And there finally are your first crickets, not your backyard variety. These are long-legged, hunched like tiny camels, with antennae that stretch out twice the length of their bodies. Their bodies are soft brown and matte, almost velvety. They don't chirp. That would be foolish in a world where silence equals safety. They freeze when they sense you, then scatter in a kind of synchronized panic. You just ruined their evening yoga session or whatever cave crickets do for fun, probably something involving bat guano. Speaking of which, a strong smell is wafting in now. Musky, sweet, and unmistakably mammalian. You're nearing a bat chamber. No sudden moves. But before we follow the crickets deeper, consider this. The caves you're walking through have likely been home to creatures since before the first dinosaurs blinked in sunlight. That same silence you're hearing, heard by trilobites. Not that they had ears, but you get the idea. And caves remember everything. Every muddy footprint, every whisper, every sleepwalker who didn't turn around in time. That's the spooky part, sure, but it's also weirdly comforting. Like the earth has secret diaries scattered under its crust, and tonight you're reading one. So take another step forward. Let your eyes adjust to the soft phosphorescence, and your ears to the rhythm of unseen wings and skittering legs. The crickets are watching you now, from behind mineral shelves and crevices. You are, for a few hushed moments, part of their world. And if you listen closely, you might just hear it, the heartbeat of stone. You crouch lower as the ceiling narrows, brushing your fingertips along the damp rock. It's cool and crumbly in places, whispering tiny stories into your skin. Ahead, the tunnel opens into a chamber with a floor like dried oatmeal, lumpy, moist, and oddly textured. But you're not alone. The cave crickets are here in force now. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, hanging from the ceiling like little, pale chandeliers, clustered on the walls like weird, twitchy moss. Their legs are absurd comically long, like stilts on a daddy longlegs with a flair for the dramatic. And those antennae? Imagine spaghetti noodles with built-in radar. Cave crickets don't see the world so much as feel it, trembling through vibrations and scent trails like nature's anxious introverts. You accidentally kick a pebble. Instantly, 5 of them leap several feet into the air with a kind of coordinated flail that screams, "No thank you." Let's get one thing straight. These crickets are not here for fun. They're here because they've adapted. In the world above, survival means blending in or running fast. Down here, it means being so skittish, so hair-trigger reactive, that even a whisper of change sends you vaulting off a guano shelf. And speaking of guano, yes, we're going to talk about poop again soon. Buckle up. But first, these crickets. Their official name is Rhaphidophoridae, which sounds like a spell you'd yell while flinging moss at someone. Scientists still debate exactly how many species exist because, well, they keep finding new ones. Some are only a few millimeters long. Others, nearly the size of your palm. Don't worry, only the small ones are interested in your granola bar. A mainstream fact for you. Charles Darwin once wrote about cave insects in The Descent of Man, musing on how they might lose their eyes over time. He didn't talk about cave crickets directly, but the principle applies. When a trait isn't needed, nature doesn't just forget it, it reclaims it. In the cricket's case, eyes are practically vestigial. Evolution said, no flashlight, no problem. You shuffle forward, avoiding a slick patch of guano that could absolutely ruin your hiking boots and your dignity. Above you, a few crickets hang silently in their signature upside-down crouch, long limbs drawn in like sleeping yogis. They're waiting for food, for a shift in humidity, for the dark to feel just right again. Cave crickets are scavengers, but they're also surprisingly picky. They nibble on mold, fungi, decaying plants, and sometimes each other because why not? In nutrient-poor environments, you either get resourceful or you get eaten. That's just the vibe down here. And here's your quirky tidbit. In some parts of Appalachia, folks used to believe cave crickets were omens. If one jumped at you, it meant someone was thinking about you. If it landed on you, time to prepare for news good or bad. It's like the superstition version of being followed by a clingy goth grasshopper. Some scientists now think cave crickets might play a bigger role in subterranean ecosystems than we realize. They don't just live in caves, they're messengers, commuters. They leave at night, trek out into the forest to scavenge, and bring nutrients back into the cave. Think about that. You're sitting in a cave with living, breathing nutrient couriers. Kind of like if Uber Eats was run by insects with zero sense of direction and an intense fear of daylight. Historians still argue whether prehistoric humans interacted with crickets at all. Were they noticed? Avoided? worshipped as spooky cave spirits? It's hard to say. Bones and tools endure, buggy vibes do not. But we do know that in ancient cave art, animals were often painted as symbols. Deer, bison, horses, but no crickets. Maybe they were just too sneaky. You notice something now, a twitch in your peripheral vision. One of the crickets is watching you, or scenting you, whatever it is they do. You stay still. It moves forward in slow pulses, antennae sweeping the air like ghostly whiskers. And then it does something unexpected. It touches another cricket gently like a tap on the shoulder. That one jumps, not away, just up. A weird little vertical hop like a popcorn kernel in slow motion. The first cricket follows. Are they communicating? Turns out yes, cave crickets can engage in complex behavior using touch and chemical cues. Some researchers think they might leave scent trails or even subtle vibrational notes that linger in the rock. It's like texting with your knees. Here's where things get uncomfortably real. The crickets in this chamber, they've probably been here for generations. Not just years, generations. They hatch, they crawl, they molt. They escape predators like blind cave spiders or opportunistic centipedes. They reproduce in soft little egg clutches tucked into damp clay, and then they die. But their story doesn't end there. Their bodies, like everything else in the cave, become part of the slow, churning nutrient cycle. Fungi bloom, beetles arrive, someone else gets a meal. It's not morbid, it's efficient. Down here, waste is luxury. Nothing is lost. You scoot closer to a crack in the wall, drawn by the sound of tiny legs scuttling across stone. A narrow passage runs deeper still, veined with roots and moisture. More crickets wait there. Their antennae flicker toward you in unison, like a polite yet menacing hello. And just like that, you realize something. Cave crickets aren't just inhabitants. They're custodians, nightly foragers, nutrient couriers, quiet witnesses to everything that passes through this living tomb. The air thickens. Somewhere above you, a bat screeches softly, reminding you that this party has more guests. The crickets remain still, unbothered. They've been living with bats, beetles, and human intruders for longer than you've been upright. You ease back onto your heels, letting your eyes rest. The crickets watch, the cave breathes. And in this quiet moment, you understand something profound. There is a kind of wisdom in skittishness, a beauty in not wanting to be noticed. So go ahead, sit with them a while. If they like you, maybe one will bless your boot with a little nutrient transfer. If not, well, at least they didn't jump directly into your hair. Yet. You've started to recognize the scent now. It's not unpleasant exactly, but it has a thick, cloying quality, earthy with a sharp, sweet undercurrent. That, dear subterranean traveler, is the aroma of bat guano. Yes, bat poop, the cave's most famous natural export and arguably its most important. You're moving into the bat zone now, and the chamber opens dramatically. It's cathedral-like tall, echoing with layers of stone balconies where bats cling like little upside-down monks. Their wings twitch in sleep, like dogs dreaming of chasing moths. You keep your footsteps soft, one loud move, and the ceiling becomes a flapping nightmare. Bats are messy roommates. They eat like gluttons and poop with gusto, and they do both right here in this chamber. But instead of being a problem, their waste has become a literal lifeline for the cave. Because in a place with no sunlight, nutrients don't rain down, they fall from the ceiling, fresh from the backside of a little winged mammal. Guano is packed with nitrogen, phosphorus, and other delicious tidbits that support a whole cast of life. Fungi bloom in it, insects feed on it, other insects feed on those insects. A cascading pyramid of poop-powered plenty. You step carefully, trying not to plant your boot in something squishy and warm. In a lot of caves, cave crickets and bats form an unspoken alliance. The crickets bring in nutrients from the outside. The bats contribute from within. Together, they maintain a kind of poo-based economy. It's not glamorous, but it works. A mainstream historical nugget. In the 19th century, guano was such a hot commodity it sparked international conflict. The United States even passed the Guano Islands Act in 1856, which let Americans claim any unoccupied island with rich deposits. All this over bat and seabird droppings. Imagine declaring war over a pile of poop. Actually, don't. That's not relaxing. You inch past a pile of older guano, crusted into what cave scientists, again, yes, that's a job called guano stalagmites. They build up over decades, sometimes centuries. Entire insects get fossilized in there. Some caves preserve ancient pollen grains in the layers, giving scientists clues about ecosystems that vanished thousands of years ago. Poop as time capsule. You didn't see that coming, did you? Suddenly a rustle, a bat stirs, then another. A ripple spreads through the colony like wind over leaves. You freeze. They murmur with tiny clicks and squeaks, communication, alarm, possibly gossip. You stay still, remembering that most bats don't want trouble. They want peace, privacy, and a buffet of insects, and yes, there's debate. Historians still argue whether ancient peoples harvested guano intentionally. Some say it was prized for farming long before modern chemical fertilizers. Others think it was simply avoided, for obvious smelly reasons. But there are signs of carved basins, worn paths, strange baskets that suggest people did come for it, maybe with cloths over their mouths, maybe holding their breath and hoping the bats were out for the night. Now for a weird little gem of knowledge. Some cave insects have adapted so specifically to guano that they can't survive without it. There's a species of beetle that lays its eggs directly in the freshest droppings. The larvae hatch and feed like tiny, joyful trash pandas. And these beetles? They're blind, of course, but their sense of smell? Better than a bloodhound's. The entire chamber is a bustling metropolis if you shrink yourself down to beetle scale. Crickets nibbling at fungal blooms, centipedes darting after prey, tiny mites and nematodes crawling over every surface. It's not gross, it's vibrant, every inch alive with purpose. You just have to stop thinking like a person. You walk slowly now, watching where you place each step. A centipede the size of a pencil darts away from your light. Bats twitch, but don't fly. They're used to bigger things moving through bears sometimes, or people with ropes and too much gear. You're just another shadow in their sleep cycle. And here's something wild. Some caves contain layers of guano so deep they've been mined like soil. In places like Thailand and Madagascar, guano is still collected today for use as fertilizer. Entire economies depend on it. Imagine explaining to your ancestors that in the 21st century, we still dig through bat droppings for profit. Some things never change. One thing you may not expect, guano can sparkle. Well, sort of. Crystals of uric acid and salt build up over time and catch the light from your headlamp like tiny stars embedded in filth. It's strangely beautiful, gross beautiful, like a Fabergé egg made of compost. You crouch again, peering into a fissure near the chamber's edge. It's filled with life. Little white worms squirm in the damp, feeding on microbial mats. You spot a spider lurking nearby, pale and leggy, waiting for something distracted to wander past. It probably hasn't seen daylight in generations. Maybe never. That's the cave's secret. Where we see decay, it sees dinner. Waste here is wealth. Death becomes rebirth, and silence pulses with barely contained energy. It's the world turned inside out. One more quirky fact before we move on. Some bat colonies leave behind so much ammonia in their guano that the air turns chemically hostile. Scientists entering such caves have to wear respirators. Imagine a room so thick with bat breath and fermented pee that your lungs beg for mercy. Yet right beneath that noxious cloud, beetles live their best lives. You lean against a rock, careful not to disturb any sleeping wings. The crickets are here too, crawling silently across the floor and up the walls. You notice their behavior around guano piles is different, more methodical, like they're browsing. They taste the soil, turn it over, move on. Little underground librarians sifting through the archives. This ecosystem, as pungent and twitchy as it seems, is balanced. The bats bring in fuel. The insects distribute it. Fungi break it down, and everything runs on the remains of something else. In the darkness, waste is more than a byproduct. It's the currency of life. You're breathing slower now. The damp air presses gently against your face, and the rustling above softens into a lullaby of tiny leathery sighs. The crickets have stopped moving, at least for now. And you're still deep in it, deeper than you thought, and things are only going to get weirder. You follow the trickle of cold air into a narrower passage, where the walls close in just enough to make your shoulders brush rock. This isn't a tourist path, it's a shortcut through time and maybe discomfort. Your footsteps sound louder here, slapping against the damp stone in echoey smacks. The crickets? Fewer now, they don't like the tight spots, but something else does. As you creep forward, the cave changes. The ceiling lowers. The walls sweat with condensation, and your breath fogs the beam of your light. There's a stillness here, but not an emptiness. It feels watched, like the cave itself is holding its breath. Suddenly, a faint glint. You crouch and find what looks like a puddle, but thicker, almost gelatinous. In it, something glides, long, pale, and blind. An olm, yes, you're face to face with a cave salamander, the OG darkness dweller. This one's a European species known formally as Proteus inguinus, but you can just call it what locals have for centuries, the baby dragon. These strange little amphibians have existed in this evolutionary dead end for millions of years. White-pink skin like candle wax. Frilly gills fanned around their necks like Elizabethan collars. And eyes? Not really. Just sunken vestiges where their ancestors once saw light. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed OMs were baby dragons flushed from the depths during floods, or whether they just liked having something freaky to gossip about on stormy nights. Either way, they show up in 16th century bestiaries listed between unicorns and basilisks. And honestly, you kind of get it. They do look mythical. The OLM in front of you flicks lazily through the pool with a motion like a whisper. It doesn't hurry. Nothing in the cave hurries unless it's running from a cricket panic jump. Down here, time moves differently. Olms can go years without eating. Years. Scientists once observed one that didn't move for 7 full years. That's not a lazy Tuesday, that's deep time stillness. And here's your mainstream fact. Olms can live over 100 years. Let that sink in. A creature that looks like a larva, that never grows up, and that could outlive you by decades. It's like finding out Peter Pan took up underwater yoga and never left Slovenia. But it's not just Europe. Across the globe, cave systems have spawned their own unique salamanders, many with convergent traits. There's the Texas blind salamander, which has similarly useless eyes and skin like bleach sheet rubber, and the Georgia blind salamander, found in underground aquifers so isolated they may as well be alien ecosystems. Here's a quirky tidbit for your weird fact drawer. OLM poop is extremely rare, not because it's dangerous, but because they poop so infrequently that it's practically a seasonal event. When it does happen, cave biologists lose their minds. It's like spotting a solar eclipse made of amphibian waste. You sit by the edge of the pool, careful not to disturb the silt. More olms drift into view, barely rippling the surface. They're not social, not really, but they tolerate one another, floating alone together, like introverts at a spa retreat. Their gills wave slowly with each breath, filtering oxygen from water so low in nutrients it's barely liquid at all. How do they survive? Well, evolution's a wizard when it wants to be. Olms have adapted to ultra-low metabolic rates. They hunt mostly by smell and electroreception, sensing the faintest of heartbeats or twitch of a bug through the water. If they find something, great. If not, no big deal. Maybe next month. You shine your light gently across the ceiling and catch sight of something ancient etched into the wall, small tool marks. You blink. Humans. Right here. Perhaps thousands of years ago, crawling, sweating, whispering just like you. Some of those early visitors might have seen the same things you do now. The same creatures, unchanged. There's a low thrum through the stone. You feel it more than hear it. Water running somewhere deeper. The cave is alive with pressure. It's not just salamanders and crickets and guano. It's a whole system. A weatherless, sunless, endless system, running on the slow heartbeat of stone. Back to your olms. One disappears under a lip of rock. Another floats motionless at the surface. Are they asleep? Is sleep even the right word? Scientists still argue whether amphibians like these experience sleep cycles in any recognizable way. Some say they drift in and out of rest like kelp swaying in current. Others argue their brains never really switch off, just idle in low power mode, like a forgotten laptop. You lean closer and see one flick its mouth open, sucking in a tiny aquatic crustacean that never saw it coming. Just like that silent ambush. No drama, no chase, just one less bug and one slightly fuller salamander. The air here feels heavier, damper, like it's thick with the cave's history. You think of monks who once charted these tunnels with dripping candles, miners who passed through in search of rare ore, scientists who crawled in for a glimpse at life stripped down to its strangest form. And you add yourself to the list. Now for a final oddity, OLMs produce a protein in their skin that scientists believe might have antimicrobial properties. There's ongoing research into whether their slime could someday help humans fight infection. Imagine curing superbugs with help from a cave-dwelling gremlin that looks like a ghost axolotl. Evolution didn't stop at weird, it went all the way to potentially useful. You rise, stepping back from the pool. The salamanders remain behind, undisturbed, drifting in their perpetual dusk. In 100 years, if no one disturbs them, they'll still be here, waiting, floating, being. You walk on, deeper still, and the darkness presses tighter. The air gets colder. But there's a pull now, like you're no longer exploring the cave, it's exploring you, learning your scent, your rhythm, your heartbeat. And all around, the quiet lives of creatures too strange for daylight hum on, unnoticed and unbothered. The tunnel opens again, slowly, like the cave is exhaling. The walls widen, your steps feel less hemmed in, and even your breath stretches out, quieter now. Above you, faint clicks begin to echo, and you pause, not the frantic, rubber band twitch of crickets, and not the chirps of bats. This is different, softer, rhythmic, almost polite. You round a bend, and there they are, amblypygids. No, not spiders, though that's what your brain will try to scream. These are sometimes called tailless whip scorpions, which doesn't help really, because now we're just combining two categories of nightmares. But hold on to your curiosity. They're actually kind of wonderful, in a horrifying Tim Burton's Nightlight kind of way. They've got wide, flat bodies, enormous pincers, like grappling hooks, and those front legs, extra long and whip thin. They're not used for walking. No, those are feelers, sensory antennae really. Imagine if your arms were 8 feet long and mostly used for sniffing people across the room. That's the vibe. You watch one now as it glides, yes, glides across the wall. It taps gently with those elongated feelers, each motion precise and eerie. It's mapping the cave, not with sight, but with touch, vibration, and chemical cues. No eyes necessary. In the dark, who needs eyes anyway? Amblypygids are the introverts of the arthropod world. They hate confrontation, almost never bite, and are surprisingly gentle unless you're a cricket. Then your dinner. You crouch to watch one pause at a crack in the wall. Its long legs twitch forward, then retract. It's sensing airflow, perhaps temperature, or maybe it's listening. These creatures can detect minute vibrations from meters away, translating the tremors of a beetle's footstep into a navigational map. If the cricket is the cave's janitor and the bat its fuel source, then the amblypygid is the ghost in the machine. Mainstream history drop. Aristotle actually wrote about cave creatures with unusual limbs and blind behaviors over 2,000 years ago. He didn't exactly understand them, but he was intrigued. Some scholars think he was describing early encounters with these whip-legged wonders. Others believe he was just confused by crickets. Historians still argue whether he ever actually entered a cave or just listened to increasingly bold stories from students who dared to go. Now here's the quirky bit. Amblypygids have personalities. No, seriously, scientific studies have shown that individual specimens vary in boldness, exploration style, and risk tolerance. Some are shy and cautious. Others are curious, pushing forward into the unknown. You watch as the one before you edges toward your boot, then changes its mind and climbs a stalagmite instead, a classic overthinker. It perches there, Claws spread wide like it's doing interpretive dance, and its whip-like feelers test the air again. Some amblypygids are thought to engage in tactile communication, grooming each other's limbs or stroking faces gently. What looks like a fencing match might be a kind of affection, cave cuddling. Insects, they're just like us. Well, not exactly. They molt, for instance. To grow, they shed their exoskeletons in an awkward, slow-motion yoga session that leaves them pale and floppy for hours. Vulnerable. It's the closest thing to a bad hair day you can have in an exoskeletal lifestyle. You find the husk of one now, half curled on a rock, just a shell, but shaped like a monster. You poke it, of course, because you're human. A small colony of amblypygids lives here, and as you explore the chamber, you notice more of them, spaced carefully, never crowding. These aren't social like ants or termites. They're polite loners, bound by the same needs but rarely touching. Like neighbors in an apartment building who nod at each other in the hallway but never share a meal. And here's the kicker. Despite how alien they look, amblypygids are more closely related to scorpions than spiders. But unlike their venomous cousins, they're essentially harmless. Their fearsome pincers can grab and hold, sure, but they don't sting. You'd have to work really hard to get bitten, and even then, it's like being nipped by a particularly grumpy salad tong. Still some ancient cave art, yes. Actual art features spider-like creatures with exaggerated limbs. In the caves of southern Africa and parts of Mesoamerica, stylized figures that some believe may represent whip spiders dance across the walls. Others insist they're ritual symbols or just artistic liberties. But those leg proportions? Suspiciously accurate. Historians still argue whether early humans feared, worshipped, or simply admired these eerie companions of the dark. Amblypygids don't build webs. They don't glow. They don't hoard treasure or whisper riddles. But they are apex ambush predators in their domain. Their slow, deliberate movements lull prey into complacency, then snap. Those claws close faster than your eyelids when someone says, "I think I saw a spider." One of them darts now, just a blur of pale legs, and snatches a cricket mid-hop. You hear the click of limbs, the whisper of struggle, and then nothing. Silent, efficient. You blink and it's back to stillness, the meal vanishing into the shadows. You follow your light now to a spot where the ceiling dips and reflects moisture in silvery sheets. The amblypygids cluster here, favoring the damp and the quiet. One climbs upside down, legs splayed like a star, and pauses. Watching you? Hard to tell, but you feel watched. It's a respectful kind of watching. Like the cave saying, "You're strange, but we'll allow it." You smile to yourself. This is the rhythm of the underworld. Click, twitch, silence, flicker. Everything deliberate, every creature adapted not just to darkness, but to economy. No wasted energy, no unnecessary drama. And yet there's grace in it. Even the amblypygid's careful prowl feels like ballet performed in complete stillness. Now here's your weird nugget. Amblypygids have been studied for their navigation memory. In lab tests, they've shown the ability to memorize complex paths using tactile and spatial clues, an insect with a mental map. Which means the one near your boot. It knows you're here. It knows this floor, this wall, this route. You are the anomaly. You back away slowly, letting the chamber dim again. The whip legs resume their soft tapping. The cave breathes. And once again, you're moving forward, not toward light, but toward another layer of dark mystery. Your feet crunch on gravel now, and the tunnel tilts downward. Gravity pulls at your knees, the air grows denser, and you start to taste the mineral tang of something ancient, like licking a fossil. You pause to catch your breath, not from exertion, but because of the feeling that something larger is near. Not in size, in presence. Ahead, the darkness thickens, folds deeper. You step through and into a vast cavern. It yawns around you, an open, echoing cathedral of stone and silence. Your light bounces off curved walls that seem to glisten. But they're not wet. They're armored. Meet the isopods. You kneel beside one, half buried in sediment, motionless until your proximity stirs it. It lumbers forward, Clunk, like a tank made of fingernails. This one's the size of your thumb, but you've heard of others in deeper, wetter systems that grow as long as dinner plates. These are not the pill bugs from your childhood terrarium. These are their unholy deep cave cousins. Call them the land lobsters of the underworld. Cave isopods are crustaceans, part of the same lineage as crabs and shrimp, but without the flair. They've traded flamboyance for practicality. Armor-plated, blind, and scavenger royalty. They're built like bullet trains with legs. If death had janitors, these would be them. Watch how they move slow, measured, but deliberate. They use their antennae to probe every surface ahead of them, like little old men feeling for their glasses in the dark. Except they never had glasses or eyes. They've been blind for hundreds of thousands of generations. Mainstream history break. Isopods have been around since the Carboniferous period over 300 million years ago. They've survived 5 mass extinctions. That's longer than dinosaurs. Longer than mammals. Longer than most gods. One scuttles over your boot, a faint prickling sensation like a miniature xylophone solo. You stay still, it explores your laces, you wonder if it thinks you're edible, and then you remember some isopods are parasitic. There's a species that eats a fish's tongue and replaces it with its own body. That's not metaphor. That's Tuesday for some of these things. But thankfully, the cave species stick to scavenging. Mostly. Quirky cave trivia. One isopod species in the Krubera cave system was found only once on a single expedition and has never been spotted again. Did it go extinct? Was it hiding, or was it watching? Historians still argue whether rare subterranean finds like these indicate undiscovered populations or tragic one-time encounters with creatures on the brink. You pass a nest of them now. Well, nest is generous. More like a cluster of damp stones where a few dozen isopods skitter in circles, picking apart something unidentifiable. A bat corpse, maybe. Or a particularly unlucky cricket. The scent is faint but sour. Not rotting, just used. One flips onto its back in the scuffle and you see its many legs flailing, pale and frantic, before it rights itself with a graceful twist. Their bellies look like segmented piano keys. Their backs like discarded armor. And here's a debate for your next weird dinner party. Are cave isopods degenerates or pioneers? Some biologists argue that their loss of sight and pigmentation is evolutionary decay, life in retreat. Others see it as optimization. Why waste energy on vision when darkness is permanent? Why not channel that energy into survival, metabolism, egg protection? Speaking of which, female isopods in caves are incredibly devoted moms. They carry their eggs in a special pouch, like a crusty marsupial. The young hatch inside, already armored, already half ghost. It's nurturing in a silent warrior sort of way. As you tiptoe past, the cavern seems to hum, not from sound, but from motion. The floor isn't still. Everywhere you look, there's movement, slow, collective, scuttling. 100 isopods combing the same square meter, antennae swaying like seagrass. It should feel creepy, but somehow it doesn't. It feels efficient. Everything down here has a job. Yours is to witness. Now here's your fringe nugget. Some cave isopods appear to respond to sound vibrations, not just in a defensive way, but curiously. Tap a rock beside one, and it might swivel toward it. Not out of fear, but something like intrigue. That's not what you expect from an armored scavenger that eats garbage and sleeps in mud. But there it is, curiosity. Above you, stalactites drip in slow rhythm. Every so often, a droplet lands on an isopod's back, and it freezes, then keeps walking. These creatures don't seem to register discomfort the same way. They persist even when pestered. They endure, not dramatically, but stubbornly, like the cave itself. And here's something wild to consider. Some cave isopods are chemically luminous, not like glowworms. Their glow is subtle, more of a phosphorescent hint, like a mossy stone left in moonlight. It's unclear why. Mating signal? Camouflage? Historians still argue whether this is an ancient leftover trait from surface ancestors or a strange new adaptation to total darkness. Either way, it's real. And right now, in a far chamber, one could be glowing faintly. You just can't see it. You find a piece of their shed exoskeleton, a tiny carapace, split down the back like a zippered jacket. You tuck it into your pocket. Later, you'll forget it's there. Months from now, you'll find it in the laundry, still intact, because nature builds to last, especially when light isn't an option. You leave the isopods behind, their shapes blending into the walls again. Another crunch of gravel underfoot, and the cave slopes once more. The silence thickens. The temperature drops. But behind you, the tiny tanks keep working, cleaning, climbing, eating, and onward you go, deeper into the Earth's quietest museum. Your next few steps are quieter, not because the cave is quieter, but because you are. Something about spending time with armored, ancient janitors makes you want to tread respectfully. The rock underfoot is smoother here, almost polished. You shine your light ahead, and it catches something strange, a string of silk taut between two rocks, and then another, then more, a web. Not the delicate, glistening geometry you see in gardens, though. This one is thick, matted, grayish, almost invisible against the rock until it moves in the breeze you just caused. You squint, lean closer, and there, curled up like a ball of shadows, is the architect. You found a cave spider. Not just any spider. This one belongs to a class of arachnids so adapted to darkness that it's likely never seen the sun. No pigment, no eyes. Long legs, too long as if the darkness has stretched them. Some cave spiders look like ghosts made of thread. Others, like nightmares folded in half. You instinctively stop breathing for a moment. Not out of fear, just respect. These spiders have been doing their thing, spinning, waiting, catching for thousands of years in the same place, unchanging, unbothered, unseen. And now you're part of their scenery. You crouch, watching one slowly uncurl. It moves with liquid patience, its legs tapping the rock in wide, delicate arcs. Unlike its surface cousins, this spider doesn't bother with intricate spiral webs. Why bother? There's no wind here, no rain, no reason to build something that will blow apart. These webs are messy, functional, and weirdly effective, like a hammock that happens to catch dinner. Historical moment for your sleepy brain. Back in the 19th century, cave spiders caused quite a stir in naturalist circles. Explorers in Slovenian caves sent back specimens with no eyes, sparking debates across Europe. Was this evolution in reverse? A punishment for living in darkness? Darwin himself weighed in. Historians still argue whether these early debates helped push evolutionary theory forward or just gave Victorian men one more excuse to crawl around in holes with jars. Now the quirky bit, some cave spiders are so specialized that they can't even survive above ground. Their metabolisms are tuned for low oxygen, stable temperatures, and consistent darkness. You could take one outside and it would panic, not in a run-for-your-life way, but more like a complete systems crash. Imagine trying to breathe on Mars with a straw. Yeah, that kind of bad. One spider now begins to eat. You watch, morbidly fascinated, as it pulls a cricket toward its fangs, not biting so much as melting. Spider venom isn't poison in the traditional sense. It's more like nature's smoothie maker. Enzymes liquefy the cricket's insides, and the spider sips it like a protein shake. Gross, efficient, utterly normal here. And here's where things get spicy. Some cave spiders don't even spin webs. They hunt, like wolves. Silent, leggy wolves. These ambush predators perch on rocks and leap when they sense prey. No warning, just movement, lunge, bite, silence. You spot one now larger than the others, legs like twigs, body matte and motionless. It's staring not with eyes, because it has none, but with something deeper. A hunter's stillness. But not all cave spiders are terrifying. Some are small enough to ride on your fingernail. Others are so fragile their legs snap if touched too roughly. You begin to see them as symbols in a way. Not of fear, but of fragility. Survivors in an environment that offers no forgiveness, no reset button. And here's a whisper of legend. In several cultures, cave spiders are seen as keepers of secrets. There's a folktale from the Balkans that speaks of an enormous blind spider who guards forgotten truths, things people have spoken in caves and then tried to forget. It weaves them into silk, hiding them until someone brave or foolish enough stumbles in. Historians still argue whether this story originated from early miners' hallucinations or ritual cave-dwelling shamanism. Either way, it sticks in your mind now. You pass another web. This one looks torn, maybe abandoned. Spiders sometimes eat their old webs, recycling the silk like seasoned campers rolling up a tent. Nothing wasted here. Even failure becomes fuel. You notice too how the spiders position their webs near cracks, airflow channels, water drips. They're not just building randomly. They're reading the cave like a novel, waiting at the best paragraphs. Everything down here operates on instinct, and yet it feels like strategy. Now lean in for a weird little gem. There's a spider that sings, or, well, stridulates. It rubs special body parts together to make tiny raspy sounds, thought to be mating calls or territorial threats. You wouldn't hear it with your ears, but the idea is absurdly charming. Somewhere out there, deep in some unexplored cave, a spider might be whispering sweet nothings in frequencies we can't even detect. You're smiling now. That's good. It means the dread is fading, being replaced by awe. That's how it works down here. Fear transforms into fascination. The spider becomes a craftsman. The web becomes architecture. And the dark, it becomes just another kind of light. One last moment before you move on. A spider dangles in front of you now, midair on a single strand. You stop. It sways. You don't flinch. This is its home, after all. You're just passing through. It climbs back up, reeling itself in like a professional rock climber, and disappears into a nook. You breathe again. Time to go deeper. The tunnel narrows. You duck instinctively, though nothing brushes your head yet. The ceiling dips and the air changes again. Cooler, wetter. There's a whisper of water now, somewhere ahead. A faint rhythmic drip like a lazy metronome. And as your light glides over the rock, you notice tiny flecks glimmering near the floor. You kneel for a closer look and catch them moving. Barely. A shimmer here, a twitch there. These aren't pebbles. These are beetles. Cave beetles, sleek, otherworldly, and absurdly niche. Each one you see might belong to a different species, some of them so hyper-specialized they exist only in this one specific system, this exact spot on Earth. That one with the long legs and glossy carapace, you're probably the first human it's seen in decades. These beetles are one of evolution's strangest jokes. Stripped of eyes, some without pigment, some even without wings, they crawl through the dark like clockwork toys powered by touch and smell. The one closest to your boot taps the rock with its antennae dainty, repetitive, and navigates around a crack with more grace than you'd manage in broad daylight. Let's take a sleepy pause to look backward. Beetles as a group have been around for at least 300 million years. They've witnessed continents drift, oceans rise and fall, entire ecosystems blink into and out of existence. They were here long before us, and odds are they'll sweep up after we're gone. Historians still argue whether beetles outnumber every other species on Earth combined, or if we've just become obsessed with cataloging them because they're weirdly satisfying to pin under glass. But cave beetles are the introverts of that big beetle party. While their flashy cousins hang out on flowers and dung, these guys keep to themselves. Their lives are small, local, ultra-private, the Airbnb version of existence. You watch one dig into a crumb of decomposing leaf matter, a rare treat that must have drifted down through cracks in the stone. To you, it's nothing. To the beetle, it's Thanksgiving. It pulls the fragment into a shadow and disappears. Quirky sidebar for your dream journal. There's a species of cave beetle in Slovenia and Ophthalmus hitleri named in the 1930s for the absolute worst person to ever be on a stamp. Not a great legacy, but here's the weird twist. Neo-Nazi collectors have since driven the species toward extinction in the wild because they keep poaching specimens for their creepy little cabinets. A dark footnote in both entomology and, well, humanity. Scientists now refer to the beetle almost exclusively by its genus or specimen number to avoid any glorification. Names matter. You move forward, carefully placing your steps to avoid crushing anything. Because here's the thing, many of these beetles are flightless, no wings, not even stumps. They lost them over generations of not needing them. Wings are costly in a place with no sky. So instead, they walk forever, slowly, waist touching, always tasting, always feeling. And now you notice something else, a pattern. They aren't randomly scattered. They move in faint lines like invisible trails. Some scientists believe cave beetles follow microscent paths laid down by their own feet, retracing familiar routes. Others suggest magnetic sensing. Historians still argue whether these trails are purely chemical, mechanical, or a blend of both. Either way, it's organized. There's choreography to it. You follow one such line and it leads you to a beetle that's different, paler, smoother. You blink, lean closer. This one's translucent. You can actually see its gut working. It pauses, then squeezes into a crack so narrow it's barely a suggestion of space. Gone. Like a ghost phasing through the wall. It's moments like this that remind you how cave creatures are often works of subtraction, not addition. Evolution takes away what's not needed. No eyes, no color, no frills. What's left is the raw code of survival, lightless, patient, perfect. Now for something deliciously niche. In a few extreme cases, certain cave beetles are suspected of eating ready bat guano fungus. That's right, not the guano itself, not even the decomposing insects that eat guano, just the fungus that grows on the stuff. That's like dining exclusively on the parsley garnish on someone else's discarded plate. But it works. Down here, every calorie counts. Every morsel has a fan club. You pause again, noticing how your breath fogs faintly, not from cold exactly, but from how close the cave air hugs your face. It's warm-blooded air now, alive with the chemical whispers of life forms you'll never meet. You sit down for a moment just listening. Somewhere something clicks, a beetle maybe, snapping its mandibles. Others rustle faintly over stone. None of them seem in a hurry. Down here, rush means risk. Slowness is a strategy. You, on the other hand, have legs built for running and no idea where you'd go if something ran after you. Don't worry, nothing will. Probably. Your flashlight flickers. You give it a gentle tap. A beetle near you responds, antennae twitching toward the vibration. Another reminder that light is optional here. But vibration? Vibration is a language. That brings us to one more quirk. Some beetles drum. Not loudly, just a gentle tap of abdomen on stone like a tiny Morse code. We don't fully know why. Is it communication, navigation, or just beetle jazz? Historians still argue whether this behavior is deliberate signaling or just a byproduct of locomotion. But the idea of a beetle band, thumping away in a rhythm only they understand, is almost too good to dismiss. As you stand again, your hand brushes the cave wall. It's moist, almost velvety with biofilm. And when your fingers trail down, they land on something hard, a beetle, frozen in place. It doesn't flee. It simply waits, trusting that stillness is safer than panic. And here, it probably is. You back away slowly, respecting its decision. Time to leave the beetles behind. You're beginning to understand that in the darkness, patience is power. The path splits now. To the left, a narrow cleft with a sour whiff of something biological. To the right, a slope leading downward, glistening faintly with moisture and a scent that's earthy, almost fermented. You go right. Your boots squish slightly, the stone underfoot slick with organic film. And then you hear it, a flutter. Small, rapid, chaotic. Not the graceful flap of birds. No, this is twitchy, directionless, like something startled in a dream. Welcome to the chamber of bats. Your flashlight arcs up, and suddenly there are dozens, no, hundreds of tiny upside-down silhouettes hanging like folded umbrellas from the ceiling. Some twitch, some shift. One sneezes, Another releases a sharp, dry squeak that echoes off the rock with uncanny clarity. They're sleeping. You try to be quiet. Here in the depths, bats rule the sky that doesn't exist. Most belong to species that never leave the cave, entirely troglophiles who've turned night into a permanent condition. They cluster together like grapes, using each other's body heat to survive. You spot one grooming itself with its little thumb claw, pulling its wings tighter, like it's tucking in for a nap within a nap. And here's your historical sprinkle. In ancient China, bats symbolize good fortune. The character for bat even sounds like the word for blessing. Bats were drawn on textiles carved into walls, celebrated. That is, until plague rumors and blood-sucking myths gave them a PR crisis centuries later. Historians still argue whether the global demonization of bats began with European vampire lore or deeper, primal fear of disease spread by the unknown. Because yes, bats have baggage. But right now, in this moment, they're just sleepy little sky mice snuggling in the rafters. One shifts, and you glimpse its face wrinkled, twitchy, almost dog-like. You half expect it to snore. Another opens one eye, and for a moment you hold your breath. But then it yawns, tiny fangs and all, and goes right back to sleep. Drama avoided. You sit against the far wall and observe. You start to notice distinctions. The fur shades, the wing membranes, the way some curl their tails around themselves like capes. One cluster seems smaller. Juveniles may be huddled under a gentle overhang. Another group clings closer to a dripstone column, using its smooth sides as a sort of balcony. Social real estate, bat style. And then there's movement. A few bats suddenly lift off, not in a panic, but in that weirdly jerky, zigzag way bats fly. Your light catches the blur of wing membranes stretched like leather kites. They swoop once, twice, then vanish into a tunnel above your line of sight. You didn't even notice it was there. They're off to hunt. Down here, bats feed on cave crickets, moths, spiders, even other bats, in rare, terrifying cases. The vampire bat gets all the press, but most cave-dwelling species are insectivores, cleaning up the ecosystem one winged pest at a time. Here's your quirky gem. Some bats use echolocation that's so precise they can see the texture of a moth's wings, or detect if a beetle has a hard shell or soft one. That's like smelling a lasagna and knowing how much garlic is in the sauce from 10 feet away. And if you're curious, yes, bat sonar has inspired technology. Sonar and medical ultrasound both borrowed the idea of bouncing, high-frequency sound to read the world. Bats were doing it before we were amoebas. You imagine for a moment what the cave must sound like to them. Not silent at all, a constant, detailed map of sound-bounced shapes. Every surface, every bug, every droplet is part of an invisible symphony. To you, this place is quiet. To them, it's deafening with information. You hear another flutter and instinctively duck, which is silly because bats avoid humans as if we're clumsy statues. One whizzes by your ear, close enough to rustle your hair. You stay still. It's gone in a blink. Now for a slightly scandalous detail. Bat guano is rich in nitrogen and once served as a major ingredient in gunpowder. Yep, during wars from the 17th to 19th centuries, armies raided bat caves to mine their poop and process it into explosives. So, somewhere along the historical timeline, these cute, sleepy winged beasts were literally fueling death machines. Historians still argue whether early uses of guano in agriculture and warfare helped or hindered conservation of bat habitats. You glance at the cave floor beneath the bat clusters. Sure enough, it's dotted with guano, dried and black, flaked like dirty chalk. But it's not just waste. Down here, it's currency. Entire micro-ecosystems build themselves on the stuff. Beetles, fungi, bacteria, even salamanders all benefit. It's a trickle-down system where guano falls, life follows. You almost slip on a patch of it, so you slow down. Respect the bat economy. Another flap, then another. You follow with your eyes as a bat circles lower and snags something midair, probably a gnat. No drama, just efficient, food on the go. And now something strange. In a high corner, half hidden by stone shadows, you spot a pale form, not hanging but perched, awake, watching. This bat looks off. larger, paler, eyes wider than normal. You lock eyes for just a moment too long. It blinks, then vanishes into the dark like a reverse firework. You shiver slightly. Some bats, like the ghost bat, really do look spectral, white-furred, elusive. And some rare species are so little studied, we only know they exist because of a skull in a drawer somewhere. The cave is always hiding things. Sometimes they come out, sometimes they just vanish again. You're starting to see this ecosystem as vertical, not just across the floor, but in layers from guano crust up to hanging bats, up to their echo-filled flyways, up to the hollow where that ghost bat disappeared. Each layer full of tiny dramas and ancient systems. And you're just a passing sound in their sonar story. You decide not to linger much longer. The bats have been kind, but your presence is a ripple in their dark lake. You tiptoe out, quieter now than when you came in. The fluttering fades behind you. Time to meet the creatures that live in the water. The air thickens with moisture as you move on, the stone beneath your boots shifting from dry crunch to a cold slickness. You begin to hear it, the hush of trickling water echoing down unseen passageways, like a whispered conversation between rocks. You duck under a low overhang and emerge into a chamber where the ceiling rises again, and at its heart, a shallow underground pool gleams under your flashlight like a dark mirror. This is no ordinary puddle. This is a subterranean spring fed by rainwater that may have taken decades or even centuries to trickle through layers of limestone above you. And what lives in it? You crouch at the edge and peer in. A flicker, then another. Meet the cavefish. At first, you might not even recognize them as fish. They don't look like anything you've seen in an aquarium or on a dinner plate. Their bodies are ghost pale, almost pink, with scales so fine they look like skin. Most are completely blind. Their eyes, if they still have them, are vestigial, just shadowy dents where sight used to be. And yet they move with eerie confidence. They drift like whispers, never bumping into each other, sensing the boundaries of their world with lateral-lined sensitive organs that detect vibrations and pressure changes in water. You wave your hand a few inches above the surface, and one fish veers sharply away. It didn't see you, it felt you. Cavefish aren't just biological oddities, they're evolutionary rebels. When their ancestors first washed into caves thousands or even millions of years ago, they had full vision, full pigmentation, all the trappings of normal fish life. But generation after generation in pitch blackness made those traits expensive and pointless. Eyes require energy. Pigment does too. So evolution trimmed the fat. What's left is a sleek little vessel of touch and motion, honed for darkness. Historical pause. In 1842, the first blind cavefish specimen was formally described by Charles Frederick Girard, kicking off a wave of fascination with our own troglobitic life forms. Scientists of the era couldn't believe creatures could thrive without sunlight. Some even assumed the fish were sickly mutants, not members of stable populations. Historians still argue whether those early classifications helped or hindered conservation efforts, since many cave species were dismissed as evolutionary dead ends. Today we know better. These fish aren't accidents. They're specialists. And here's a juicy tidbit for your next sleepy trivia dream. One species of cavefish, the Mexican tetra, is studied in labs not just for its weird lack of eyes, but because of its resistance to diabetes. That's right, they store fat like champs, survive long stretches without food, and seem immune to insulin resistance. Human scientists are, understandably, both fascinated and jealous. You watch one now as it glides near a submerged stone. It seems to pause, if pause is even a concept in the steady ballet of fish, and you realize it's likely foraging. Some cavefish nibble on biofilm, bacterial mats, or whatever stray insect carcasses drift into the pool. Others may feed on the larvae of other subterranean insects. In this lightless world, every calorie is a discovery. The pool darkens further toward the far end. You shine your light, but the beam is swallowed quickly. Depth here is deceptive. In some caves, these pools can be hundreds of feet deep, leading into flooded passageways that no human has ever entered. Divers have tried, of course. There are entire exploration teams who specialize in sump diving, crawling through submerged tunnels with scuba gear and nerves of steel. Some make it, some don't. You won't be going in, not tonight, not with your heart beating this softly. Another fish drifts by, then another. One bumps gently into its sibling, then immediately swims away. Apology made in touch and motion. You spot something new now, a tiny shrimp, practically transparent, almost impossible to see without the ripple of movement. It hovers for a second near the bottom and then vanishes under a rock. That's not just random, some cave systems house entire microcosms of crustaceans. Amphipods, isopods, things that look like they crawled out of a fever dream and never saw the sun again. Some cave-dwelling shrimp are found nowhere else on Earth, not just by species, but by drainage basin. That is, a shrimp in this cave might be genetically distinct from one in the next valley over, even though they look identical. The reason? Isolation. Once water carved these underground veins, populations became marooned. What started as one species turned into dozens. You get that familiar, tingling thought again. You're walking through a living fossil record. And the weirdest part? Some of these fish and shrimp never move more than a few square meters in their entire lives. They're born here, they drift here, they die here. Their world is measured not in miles but in inches. You've already crossed more of their universe in one footstep than they ever will. You dip a gloved finger in the water. It's freezing, absolutely bone-deep cold, and yet the animals here don't just tolerate it, they need it. Their metabolism is perfectly tuned to these exact conditions. Raise the temperature by just a few degrees or alter the water's oxygen content, and their delicate balance collapses. Here's one more oddball detail before we go. Some species of cavefish can climb. Yes, climb. There's a kind in Thailand that uses its strong pectoral fins and sucker-like mouth to inch its way up waterfalls inside limestone caves, like the world's tiniest rock climber. No eyes, no fear, just grip and instinct. Historians still argue whether this ability evolved as a survival mechanism during seasonal floods, or if it's a leftover trait from more mobile ancestors. You lean back and listen. The water drips steadily. Somewhere deep beneath the pool, unseen systems are still flowing. Aquifers carrying ancient rain. Layers of dissolved minerals inching towards stalagmites not yet born. Fish drifting through pitch-dark cathedral halls that may never know another visitor for centuries. The silence here doesn't feel empty. It feels full, intentional. You shine your light across the pool one last time. The cavefish pay you no mind. They've seen your kind before, or at least sensed it. You step back from the edge. The path ahead veers into a low crawl space, dappled with condensation. The next creatures on your path, they don't swim, they slide. The ceiling dips low again, and you have to crouch, almost on hands and knees. Your backpack scrapes against damp rock. It smells of stone and cold lichen green scents from things that don't need sunlight to be green. A few feet forward, and the passage opens just enough to let you sit up. You click off your light for a moment. Darkness. Pure. Not even your hand exists. It's the sort of blackness that makes your ears ring. So you click the light back on, and the world returns. Just a narrow corridor, ribbed with dripping stone, and a glistening streak across the floor like someone dragged a wet ribbon through dust. You follow the ribbon. It's a slime trail. And that means one thing. The cave's slowest residents are nearby. You round a bend and see it motionless at first, blending with the stone. Then it shifts, extending a soft, pale body outward like a cautious tongue. A cave slug. Its skin is semi-translucent, creamy with the faintest tinge of lavender, like someone tried to describe the color moonlight and gave up halfway. Two short antennae wave at the air, sensing vibrations and moisture levels. It creeps forward, laying down another glistening path behind it. Here's your historical flash. In medieval Europe, slugs, especially big ones, were feared as omens. Farmers believed they ruined crops through curses more than consumption. Some even painted them with saltwater symbols in hopes of warding off disaster. Historians still argue whether these beliefs stemmed from legitimate agricultural ruin or sheer slug-related revulsion. But down here, there are no curses, just patience. Cave slugs are detritivores, meaning they eat decay. Mold, fungus, shed exoskeletons, forgotten cricket legs. They are the janitors of the cave world. Their mouths, despite looking like a cartoon kiss, are covered in tiny rows of radula. Think of it like a sandpaper tongue, perfect for scraping biofilm and tiny particles from rock. And they aren't alone. You notice movement on the wall. Another shape, smaller this time, more deliberate in its advance. A cave snail. Its shell is pale, almost ceramic in color, like a tiny ghost helmet. The snail pulls itself along with methodical ripples of its foot, antennae extended, shell lightly bouncing with every motion. You could outpace it by sneezing, and yet it's doing just fine. Snails like this can live for decades. One species in Georgia's Krubera Cave was once estimated to crawl just a few centimeters per year. You read that right, per year. Historians still argue whether the measurement was accurate or just a sleepy intern's worst summer. Why so slow? Efficiency. In a cave, moving fast is dangerous and wasteful. Down here, it's better to move cautiously, digest completely, and stay unnoticeable. You lean closer and see a patch of fuzzy gray on the wall fungus. And just beneath it, barely visible, another creature, a velvet worm. Okay, so this is where things get squirmy. Velvet worms aren't worms at all. They're ancient cousins of arthropods, survivors from a time before legs were cool. Their bodies look like plush caterpillars with dozens of stubby feet. And here's the wild part. They shoot glue. Yep. When hunting, they fire twin jets of sticky slime to trap prey like Spider-Man. Once the prey is immobilized, they bite into it and liquefy the insides. Downright elegant. They're extremely rare in caves, and you might have just lucked into seeing one. This one glides slowly across the stone, its stubby legs moving in a wave pattern, leaving behind a faint smear of moisture. And speaking of squishy legends, did you know some Victorian naturalists believed slugs were the lowest form of life? Like on the cosmic scale. Darwin didn't quite agree. He saw the elegance in evolution even at its slowest, but that mindset lingered. In fact, early cave explorers often ignored soft-bodied animals entirely because they were too boring or too gross to record properly. You watch now as the slug reaches a crumb of something, maybe cricket remains, maybe a pellet of fungus, and starts to feed. It looks more like kissing than eating. But slowly, the crumb vanishes. Time moves differently in this chamber. A droplet falls from the ceiling and hits the slug square on the back. It flinches slightly, then resumes. And here's your strange snack fact. Cave slugs have been known to eat chalk, not for nutrition, but for calcium, to reinforce their tissues in the mineral-poor cave world. Imagine needing to gnaw on drywall just to stay healthy. They also sometimes eat their own slime trails for recycling purposes. A little grotesque, a lot efficient. You spot a millipede curling its way up a wall, a cousin of the flat-backed kind that thrives in damp decay. Its many legs ripple like threads in a windless curtain. Some of these cave-adapted species lose their pigment just like the fish do. Others retain odd patterns, like the Ariadne couldn't decide whether to be fashionable or invisible. There's a real team effort vibe to this ecosystem. The crickets die, the fungi bloom, the slugs feast, the snails polish the leftovers. Even their poop becomes fuel for bacteria and smaller invertebrates. You begin to understand the rhythm. Nothing is wasted, nothing is quick, everything is cyclical and perfectly designed to function in this hush. You sit against the rock and listen. Your own breathing feels too loud here. You suddenly remember that myth that slugs can regrow themselves from just a piece-like living Play-Doh. Not entirely true, but some can survive severe damage, and others hermaphrodite themselves into new roles as needed. Nature's motto, flexibility or death. One final oddity before we go. In a few rare caves, scientists discovered troglodytic flatworms with no mouths. They absorb nutrients directly through their skin. These creatures live slow-motion lives of osmosis, grazing invisible microbial films with all the urgency of a glacier. You watch the last ripple of the slug as it disappears under a rock. Somehow you're starting to admire them, the slugs, the snails, the glue guns, and slime trailers. They move like the cave itself, slow, methodical, unbothered by your flashlight or your questions. And somewhere ahead, the walls shimmer with new color. Something stranger is waiting. Something pink? You round another tight bend in the rock, the walls closing in like folded arms, then opening again into a chamber that smells faintly of minerals and wet clay. Your light catches on something that makes you pause, a pale shimmer, not stone, not slime. It moves. At first you think it's another slug, but it's longer, thinner, and unmistakably pink. Meet the OLM. It's almost serpentine, about the length of your forearm, with tiny, underdeveloped limbs and skin so translucent you can see the faint suggestion of bones and blood vessels underneath. Its face, if you can call it that, features a pair of closed, sightless eyes buried beneath layers of skin. The mouth curls up slightly at the corners, like it's keeping some ancient joke to itself. Olms are cave salamanders, and they are some of the strangest vertebrates alive today. Native to the deep limestone caves of the Dinaric Alps in the Balkans, they've been living underground for so long, they've essentially become myth. Locals once called them baby dragons when floodwaters flushed them out into the light. Imagine finding one of these wriggling on your front step after a storm. You'd probably light a few extra candles that night. And get this, Olims can live more than 100 years. No, that's not a typo, 100. They reach maturity late, around age 15 or even 20, and their metabolism is so slow they can go years. Yes, literal years without eating. Historians still argue whether the record holder for fasting, 10 years, actually occurred in the wild or under stressful lab conditions. But either way, you've definitely eaten more snacks today than this creature has in a decade. It swims now, slowly, weaving between stalagmites like a ghost eel. You shine your light across the floor and spot another one, half hidden beneath a thin film of silt. It barely reacts. That's not laziness, it's strategy. Down here, sudden motion could be fatal. Most predators are gone, sure, but food is so scarce that burning extra energy could be the difference between surviving the winter and not. And they aren't the only amphibian darkness dwellers with this vibe. Let's make a little detour, mentally if not physically, to the Edwards Aquifer in Texas. There, the Texas blind salamander slinks through underwater caves like a whisper in a wet pipe dream. It too has no functional eyes, and it relies on electroreception, a biological sixth sense that allows it to detect slight electrical fields in other living things. That's the same trick sharks use, by the way. So next time someone calls you cold-blooded, maybe take it as a compliment, a fringe tidbit. Some researchers believe that OLMs possess rudimentary hearing, not through ears, but via vibrations transmitted through their bones. Imagine feeling the footsteps of a cave cricket echo through your skeleton. That's your whole world, your entire existence mapped in tremors. And speaking of quirky adaptations, OLMs breathe through both gills and lungs. Their feathery external gills flare out from their neck like Elizabethan collars, lending them an air of tragic royalty. But they can also rise to the surface to gulp air if oxygen levels drop too low. Historians still argue whether this dual respiratory strategy is a throwback to their terrestrial ancestors or an adaptation developed post-cavification. Either way, it's like nature couldn't decide and said, you know what? Have both. The chamber around you hums with stillness. You kneel beside a small pool and peer in. It's dark, but your light reveals the edges of more salamanders tucked under ledges, their limbs barely twitching. Most of the time, they don't hunt. They wait. They rely on the random wanderings of tiny crustaceans, insect larvae, and whatever drifts too close. If nothing comes, they continue to wait. They've had centuries to get good at it. You shift your weight, and a rock slips underfoot. The soft splash makes one of the olims twitch just slightly and then still again. The water settles. A single bubble rises, pops quietly. Fun evolutionary sidebar. Olims are what's known as neotenic. That means they retain juvenile features into adulthood like gills, for instance. While most salamanders metamorphose and move to land, olims just never grow up. They stay in their larval form for life, perpetual teenagers hiding in the basement, ignoring your calls. You'd think such a bizarre animal would be common in fantasy, but no. They're real and rare. And they only live in very specific water conditions, cool, clean, and mineral-rich. Pollution in their habitats threatens their already dwindling populations. They can't just pack up and move to the next river over. Their world is fixed, shaped by stone, filtered by centuries of rain. You rest your hand lightly on the stone edge of the pool. It's smoother here, worn down not just by water, but by time, like the cave itself is slowly polishing its own insides. Everything is still. One elm drifts lazily, brushing against a stalactite's shadow, then circles back to its original spot. For a moment, the world seems paused, and in that pause, another odd memory bubbles up. Back in the 1600s, a Slovenian bishop reportedly mistook olms for infant dragons. He wrote about them as signs that full-grown dragons must be lurking deeper in the earth. Dragons may be gone, but the pink ghosts remain, and they're weirder than any fire breather. Now you start to notice something else. Tiny red flecks on the water's edge. It's not blood, it's a type of cave-dwelling copepod, a microscopic crustacean that thrives in total darkness. They swim in erratic, twitchy patterns, forming the lowest rung on the food ladder. You blink and realize the olem has subtly adjusted its position. Is it hunting? You wait. Nothing happens. Then, without warning, it lunges just a ripple, and the copepods scatter. One disappears, dinner served. The olem drifts back into its silt bed like it never moved. You pull your light back, letting the chamber fall into its natural gloom. Behind you, another tunnel yawns open, and now it's time to meet some creatures that aren't quite animals. Not quite plants either. They glow, they pulse, and they're probably older than the cave itself. You shuffle forward, knees scuffing against damp rock, and the ceiling drops low again. The air cools even further, sharp with the scent of wet minerals and something else, an earthy tang, like compost tea and mushrooms. It clings to the back of your throat in a way that makes you want to cough, but you resist. Caves prefer silence. As your light sweeps the wall, something catches a faint glow. You freeze, lower the beam, and then notice it properly. A faint green shimmer pulses on the stone. Bioluminescence. You inch closer. It's not bright, not like glow sticks or emergency exit signs, more like the ghost of light. Like the wall remembers sunlight and is whispering it back to itself. The source? A fine web of fungus, clinging to the wall in patches. If you hadn't been looking for it, you might have walked right past. Caves are home to some of the strangest life forms on Earth, and not all of them fit neatly into animal or plant. Welcome to the world of glow-in-the-dark fungi, microbial mats, and chemical symbiosis that would make sci-fi writers raise an eyebrow. Your spotlight now lands on a patch of what looks like fur. It isn't. It's a dense fungal colony, a massive hyphae branching like cotton candy, but thinner, paler, alive in ways we're only beginning to understand. Some of these fungi have evolved to survive solely on bat droppings. Others eat dead insects, mold, or even minerals directly from the cave wall. The ultimate recyclers. Back in the 19th century, early cave explorers in France described this kind of growth as stone mold and assumed it was a disease of the rock itself. Historians still argue whether those explorers ever knew they were documenting fungi at all, or just writing about spooky wall fuzz. But the glowing ones, that's the true mystery. Not all fungi glow, and even among cave species, bioluminescence is rare. Some researchers believe it's a byproduct of how they metabolize oxygen. Others think it serves as a lure for insects, who then spread spores, though that idea falls apart in caves that have almost no insects. One of the most fringe theories? That it's not for insects at all, but for bacteria, a sort of microbial courtship. Like fungal tinder, but glowier. You switch off your light, at first pitch black. Then yes, your eyes adjust. The glow becomes clearer, like stars in a foggy sky. Little clusters, soft pulses, living constellations on wet stone. There's a quiet beauty to it. You think of city lights seen from above, or the reflection of traffic on wet pavement, but there's no movement here, just glow. And not all glowing cave dwellers are fungi. In certain lava tubes and damp overhangs in places like New Zealand and Australia, there are glowworms. Not worms, technically, more like the larval form of certain flies. These creatures dangle from the ceilings and emit cold blue-green light to attract prey. Their sticky threads hang like bead curtains, and when unsuspecting insects wander too close, snap. Dinner. Okay, yes. It's kind of like the horror movie version of a chandelier, but mesmerizing too. Cave biologists who studied glowworms in Waitomo once wore mirrored hats to study the ceiling populations without craning their necks all day. Fringe, but effective. That research revealed that glowworms pulse their light differently depending on how hungry they are. Less food, more glow. Desperation literally radiates from them. Historians still argue whether bioluminescence in these larvae is a trait evolved for cave life or an adaptation borrowed from their above-ground ancestors. But whatever the origin, it's one of the cave world's strangest light shows. You run your fingers gently along the edge of the glowing fungus. It doesn't react. This light isn't meant for you. It's older than you. Older than most vertebrates. It's light that has never touched the sky. Here's your quirky fact of the section. Some bioluminescent fungi have been reported in ancient folklore as fairy fire or will-o'-the-wisps. In Appalachian folk tales, glowing logs and dark woods were considered warnings from the dead or signs of buried treasure. One Civil War soldier even claimed to be guided by glowing logs out of enemy territory. The logs were infected with Armillaria mellea, a bioluminescent fungus also known as honey fungus. Sweet, spooky, and surprisingly helpful. In fact, glowing wood was once used to make makeshift nightlights in trench hospitals. Bioluminescent bark peeled from infected trees provided just enough glow to tend wounds without alerting the enemy. In natural glowing gauze. We really did try everything before electricity. You crouch near another patch this time. It's not fungus, but a sheet of microbial biofilm. Slippery, iridescent. The kind of thing you expect on alien planets or inside old Tupperware. Biofilms like these are complex communities of bacteria and archaea. Some produce pigments that shimmer in response to light or heat. Others perform chemosynthesis, converting inorganic molecules into energy. No sunlight required. These microbial mats are basically cave gardens. They feed everything from springtails to worms to protozoa. Without them, even the tiniest food chains would collapse. And they don't just sit there looking pretty. They alter the chemistry of the cave itself, sometimes dissolving stone, sometimes laying down thin mineral crusts. Caves aren't static. They're in slow-motion dialogue with the microbes that inhabit them. You shift your gaze and notice something else, little crystals forming around a biofilm's edge. They sparkle, but not like treasure, more like the inside of a geode. Some bacteria help precipitate minerals, shaping formations over centuries. So yes, that glittery wall you saw back in Section 4 might have been grown by bacteria, the slowest artists in the world. Here's a little irony. The things most people imagine when they think of caves, glowing stones, magical moss, alien colors, are usually the least visible parts. They're subtle, require darkness, patience, humility. You pause. Everything around you is alive in ways that don't register as life at first glance. And suddenly, you realize just how alien Earth can be when you turn out the lights. Your light returns, flickering slightly. Time to move on. There's another passage ahead, wide enough to stand fully. A low rushing noise fills your ears. Water. A lot of it. You're about to meet the blind navigators of the underground river. And yes, some of them have claws. The sound grows louder as you edge forward, steady and unhurried, like someone whispering through a straw. But then it deepens, becomes unmistakable. The hush of flowing water. The cave widens again, and suddenly you're standing at the edge of a slow-moving underground river. It gleams under your beam, black as ink, its surface broken only by tiny ripples that vanish almost as soon as they form. You crouch and dip your fingers in, cold enough to bite. Colder still when you remember how long it's been here. Days, years, probably longer. And just below the surface, a flicker of movement. You squint, then catch a glimpse of a pale shape darting under the current. Another, and then a third. They move like shadows, quick and erratic, and then click. A tiny sound echoes out from one of them, like a minuscule typewriter key being tapped underwater. These are cave crayfish, blind, white, practically translucent. They're the pirates of the subterranean waterways, armed with claws, but no eyes. And yet, they know exactly where they're going. You track one as it paddles sideways beneath a ledge, then emerges from beneath a curtain of dripping limestone. Its antennae stretch forward like feelers, sweeping across the ground ahead. In the absence of sight, every twitch becomes a question, every touch an answer. These crayfish have been underground for millions of years. Their evolutionary cousins still paddle through your local creek, claws raised like tiny boxers. But these are the monks of the crustacean world, solitary, pale, perfectly adapted to silence. In fact, some species are so specialized that if you were to move them just a few miles away, even to a different cave system, they'd die. That's how tightly they're tied to this one environment. Your whole life in one dark corridor, no pressure. And here's your historical sidebar. Back in the 1800s, the first specimens of blind crayfish collected from caves in the southeastern U.S. baffled scientists. At first, they thought they'd found a new genus altogether. One naturalist insisted they must be juveniles, unfinished in some way. Historians still argue whether that was ignorance or just good old-fashioned 19th century arrogance. Of course, crayfish aren't the only travelers on these hidden rivers. There are blind catfish too, like the famous Mexican blind cat, which looks like someone took a regular catfish and then gently erased its eyes and most of its pigment with an eraser. They glide effortlessly through pitch-black aquifers, using their lateral lines to detect vibrations in the water. It's basically sonar, but homemade. Quirky tidbit for you: some blind cavefish will spiral in place when confused, spinning slowly to gather more sensory data through their skin. It's not inefficient, it's genius. Try using a Roomba in a pitch-black maze and tell me it doesn't do the same thing. You step back and follow the edge of the river, careful not to slip. The limestone here is slick with biofilm, and the water runs silently beside you like an idea you can't quite remember. The roof drops low again and forces you into a squat, but the river keeps going. The deeper you go, the stranger it gets. One pocket of the stream widens into a still pool, and your light catches something clinging to the underside of a rock ledge, a mass of blind, translucent isopods. Think pill bugs, but longer, flatter, and with far more legs than seems strictly necessary. They scurry away from the light in rippling motion. You can almost hear them whisper, "Too much, too much, too much." Isopods like these aren't dangerous, but they're survivors. Some species have been around since the Paleozoic era, adapting slowly, deliberately, the way continents move. These particular ones feed on detritus swept in by floods leaves, bits of bark, the occasional unlucky insect washed down from the surface. And sometimes, brace yourself, it's not just bugs. Remember how we talked about bodies in caves? Yeah. Occasionally a wayward mouse, bat, or even something larger will fall into a sinkhole and wash down here. The river eats everything eventually. These scavengers make sure of that. But not all cave creatures feed passively. Some hunt. Take the cave loach, for example. Small, slender, and aggressive enough to bite the toes of waiting researchers. They've been observed nipping at springtails and crustaceans with surprising accuracy, especially considering they're completely blind. Instead of eyes, they rely on hair-like mechanoreceptors along their sides that detect water displacement. Basically, they feel motion from a distance, then lunge like little torpedoes. Historians still argue whether loaches developed this talent before or after losing their eyes. Chicken, egg, or cavefish. You sit now on a dry slab near the river's edge, letting your fingers trail lazily through the water. It feels ancient, and not just old, but outside of time. Like this could be the same river running beneath Mayan temples, Ottoman villages, modern cities. Just deeper. Always deeper. There's something comforting about it. The idea that while the surface world crashes and reshapes itself, politics, buildings, pandemics, this river just keeps flowing through rock. Steady, quiet, forgotten, but never gone. Here's a fun fringe fact. In some cultures, underground rivers were believed to be literal portals to the underworld. The Greeks imagined the Styx. The Maya had Xibalba. And across Europe, legends describe mysterious waters that could carry souls or secrets. You dip your fingers in again and wonder not about souls exactly, but memory. What does this water remember? Above your head, a drop of condensation lets go and lands on the back of your hand. It's cold but not unfriendly. You stand. Your light sweeps ahead and picks up movement, not from the river this time, but from the ceiling crew just above it. A creature with legs, lots of them, and the kind of face that only evolution could love. Your next encounter has pincers, venom, and more drama than a Victorian diary. Time to meet the cave's true drama queens, the arachnids. The creature dangling from the ceiling doesn't scuttle away like a startled spider. It holds its ground, legs poised, body still, as if daring you to blink first. You don't. Not right away, anyway. Your light reveals it fully now, long, spindly legs splayed like scaffolding, a body that's oddly flat, and those pincers wickedly curved, twitching ever so slightly. This isn't your typical spider, it's a whip spider. Or if you're feeling dramatic, and why not, it's called an amblypygid. Don't worry, it won't hurt you. Probably. Despite the sinister aura, whip spiders are shy, mostly harmless, and outrageously misunderstood. They use their pincers, technically called pedipalps, to grasp prey, usually insects or tiny crustaceans, and their two front legs as feelers. Long and thread-like, those legs wave constantly, reading the cave's invisible braille. It's like echolocation, but touch-based. They're blind, of course. Most cave arachnids are. Fun historical note. Early European cave explorers were so horrified by the whip spider's alien shape that they assumed it was venomous, possibly even lethal. Historians still argue whether those early accounts were cautionary tales or the result of deeply overactive imaginations, fueled no doubt by flickering torchlight and cold feet. But let's be real, you'd freak out too if something this creepy crawly showed up next to your candle in 1822. Still, whip spiders aren't even the strangest arachnids down here. That honor probably goes to the pseudoscorpions. Imagine a tiny scorpion claw and all but without the stinger. Now shrink it down to the size of a grain of rice and give it a cave-living attitude. Pseudoscorpions are stealthy. They'll hitch rides on cave crickets, latch onto their legs like little armored backpackers, and disembark wherever the food is good. They don't walk far, but they know how to travel. Quirky tidbit for the section. Pseudoscorpions are sometimes found in old library books, feasting on book lice. Yep, these little cave goblins can survive in dusty corners of civilization and in the deepest dark. They're the ultimate introverts. You pause near a stretch of wall where dozens of tiny spiders cluster, barely larger than sesame seeds. These are likely Troglohyphantes, a genus of cave-dwelling spiders so hyper-specialized they've lost their pigmentation, their eyes, and let's be honest, probably their will to party. Instead, they weave dense little webs close to the rock and wait. Forever. These spiders don't sprint, they lurk. And just in case you're still imagining caves as empty and lifeless, here's the kicker. Many of these arachnids have life cycles stretching longer than their surface cousins. Some whip spiders live over 10 years. That's a decade in the dark, eating whatever stumbles into reach. Imagine that kind of patience. Or boredom. Your light catches another flash movement again. But this time it's smaller. You get closer and realize it's a harvestman, not a spider, despite the nickname Daddy Longlegs. This one is pale white and glossy, like a drop of milk given legs. Unlike spiders, harvestmen don't spin webs or inject venom. They just lumber around slowly, feeding on decomposing plant and animal matter, occasionally stopping to groom their long legs like someone adjusting invisible suspenders. Some species of harvestmen form loose social groups in warmer caves, dozens clustering together on ceilings. Why? We're not sure. Warmth, mating, arachnid support groups? Historians still argue whether these clusters are cooperation or mere coincidence. And somewhere nestled into a crevice in the rock, you spot a tiny thread of silk. Not a full web, just a signal strand, a tripwire, someone's home, and they're waiting for dinner. All around you, the cave pulses with quiet life, not in bursts, not in sounds, but in soft movement, in ancient stillness. You lean against a boulder and realize something. Nothing here is in a hurry. Every predator you've seen, the whip spider, the loach, the harvestmen, they're ambush specialists. They wait, they drift, they touch the world gently. And when something comes too close, they act. It's a rhythm we rarely feel on the surface. Up there, you chase your food, you fight traffic. Down here, you wait for things to come to you. A lifestyle that rewards stillness, which is kind of poetic, really. Here's one final fringe fact for the road. In Slovenia's Postojna cave, biologists once documented a female OLM, a blind, aquatic salamander laying eggs for the first time in years. She didn't eat for months, stayed motionless most of that time, and still successfully birthed a new generation. The process took years, no stress, no rush, and that's the truth of cave life. Endurance, not drama, not speed, just a quiet persistence in the dark. You tilt your head back one last time and switch off your light, just for a moment. Total black. Not scary. Not anymore. You breathe in the stillness, the rich mineral air, the hum of invisible lives. And now softly, slowly, let's start to wind down. Here we are, gently surfacing from the depths of the earth's silent heart. You've wandered far tonight, through winding tunnels and whispering rivers, past cricket-legged shadows and glimmering fungi. But now the pace slows. Your breathing softens. The air in the cave feels warmer now, like it's wrapping around your shoulders. A velvet blanket pulled up to your chin. In the stillness, you begin to feel how much life surrounds you. Quiet, patient, strange, but no longer alien. These creatures of the dark have endured what we can't even imagine. They've molded themselves to shadow, turned blindness into precision, and made entire worlds out of silence. And yet they're not so different from us. They rest, they wait, they reach out into the dark, hoping to touch something. Let your body grow heavier. Let your thoughts slow like a river under stone. All those twitching antennae, those delicate webs, the blind eyes that still see, they're fading now. Just like the glow of bioluminescent threads, dimming with distance. Fading, fading. You're safe here. Nothing will follow you out. Let the weight of the world melt away with the drip, drip, drip of a cave's patient heartbeat. Now rest. You've gone deep enough for one night.